Hello, this is GeoTechland, and today I'll be showing you how to make Gnome better. By default, vanilla Gnome, in my opinion, is not that great. Right now I'm actually going to be using Pop! OS as my test because Pop! OS loads not just a vanilla version of Gnome, they even have their own theme that actually removes and makes actually vanilla Gnome worse. For example, there are no minus and or minimize and maximize buttons here, so it almost takes vanilla Gnome, which is not that great, and makes it worse apparently. So I thought this would be the best OS to use to and show you a very easy way to add extensions to Gnome and just overall tweak Gnome to make it look a lot more user-friendly. So for Pop! OS, the very first thing you want to do is open up the Pop shop. And in this case, no matter what distro you use, whatever their shop is, the key thing you're doing here is installing Gnome tweaks. You go over here, you hit install Gnome tweaks. Some distros like Manjaro Gnome include tweaks by default, which I commend them a lot for. Partially why that's my main OS. But it's pretty easy to download. So once you do that, you go to activities and you go to applications and you look for the Gnome tweaks, which is here. So to fix the issue with just the close button showing here, which makes this kind of messy and very unusable, is you simply go to window title bars and enable the maximize and minimize in. And just like that, you already have a much better, much more usable OS here. Let me actually clear all of this. This is actually a live session of Pop! OS, which should work just fine. But this is like the main desktop area, and by default, there's no apps I can click. The only thing I have to do is hit the Windows key and load up the applications, and that to me is just not that great. It's just an extra step here, and it kind of makes it unusable for me, especially just from what I'm used to and what I'm sure a lot of newbies looking at Linux may be used to. And so the other way is to go to activities so you can load up this menu. You don't necessarily have to worry too much about it if you install like Ubuntu, because that comes with Gnome and it tweaks it already for you to have like an app menu here. Same thing with Manjaro Gnome, it kind of has a very similar layout to Ubuntu. It's only with like a distro like Pop! OS or Fedora that has vanilla Gnome where it's similar like this, where you have to hit activities to load up this little icons set here, or this little panel. So to tweak that, you got to go over to your browser, in this case Firefox, and we're going to use simple add-ons here, or just one simple add-on I should say. And that app is just simply Gnome. You just type in Gnome, it's actually Gnome shell integration. You just click on that, add to Firefox, and hit add. One thing to note here, I know there's other ways to install extensions to Gnome, but I feel like this is the most newbie friendly way of doing it. Actually, I'm going to close this out because there's one other thing I wanted to show you before we get to using that app. And as you guys saw, Firefox, the text is very small, or just the layout is very tiny because of the high resolution display here. And if you go back to Gnome tweaks here, there's a really easy way to fix that. So you go to fonts and you can tweak the fonts and put it to like 1.3, and it'll make it, the fonts here in the OS, a lot better. It'll still be tiny, but if you set it to at least 1.38, that's where you no longer have that issue. So if you go back to Firefox Now you can kind of see a lot better with what I'm working here, so you can see the icons here. Sorry, I'm going to click on the Gnome icon that we just installed, and simply there's lots of extensions, but the one we're dealing with here is -2doc, which is what Manjaro and I think even Ubuntu use. And so you just click on, it'll prompt you to install. You install, and I think it's installed already. And just like that, this loads by default here. So you can even close that and it's still there. We have just made this much more usable. And we go back to Gnome tweaks actually. We can even, well, tweak it. I personally like this menu in the bottom, so if you go to extensions, you'll see -doc show up here. You can turn it off, turn it back on. If you go to the settings, you can tweak a lot about it. It's very simple to use here. You put it in the bottom, but hey, it's still a little bit too tiny. Well, let's make it bigger. So now we're at 64. I think this is the ideal for me, but obviously you can tweak it, tweak the behavior here. I won't really go into details about all of this, but because I think this is good enough for most people, I think. So this is good if you're coming from a Mac layout, you may like this menu. But if you're coming from a Windows or Windows 10 layout, there is another extension actually. You go back to extensions. There is -2 panel. And again, very simple, just switch it on. It'll install for you automatically. And hey, look at here. We've got 2 panels or menus at once, so go back to extensions, -doc, let's turn it off. Now we only have this more traditional panel where all the menus and icons are moved here. Very familiar if you're using Windows. And again, we can tweak settings on this. You can move it to the top, to the bottom again. I personally like having the IntelliHide turned on and changing it here. Only hide panel when it is obstructed by Windows. I think this is the best layout. So right now it's not being obstructed, but if you move it down, it'll hide. But yeah, that's the best, most ideal way of having it, in my opinion. And obviously you can tweak the size here. This seems to have a lot more features in terms of what you can tweak. So if you wanted to make this bigger, you can tweak that. I think here, and fine tune, you can go to like the status icon. No, tray font size maybe. Yep, got it pretty huge there. But all right, you can tweak it to your liking, and that's what I love about these tweak tools, that you have the freedom to just kind of customize your layout. And that's why I personally don't like distros by default disable and don't have these features included. You have Pop! OS, Ubuntu, Elementary OS that don't include any tweak tools. Manjaro does include tweak tools, at least in Gnome's version. Linux Mint doesn't include a tweaks tool, but it has its own built-in tweaks where you can kind of tweak things around. Because that's what Linux is about. It's about freedom. It's about tweaking things to your liking. One other bonus that I wanted to include here, but I had issues with, is there's also a menu that is a more traditional menu that you can install, and it'll show up here as a menu. That I have that working on Manjaro Gnome, as you can see from like my most recent previous videos. But when I try it here, it just doesn't work. It says on, install, and it just errors out, and I go to the tweaks and it doesn't work. But that's a bonus for a more advanced user. I'm sure there's an easy way to or a way to install this without using this add-on that may enable it to work, but that's probably for the more advanced users, and whereas this video is more directed to newbies or someone looking to try a distro. But there you guys have it. We just made Gnome, a vanilla version of Gnome, more usable, and honestly with these little tweaks I think Gnome becomes better than any other distro, but that's a discussion for another day. Hope you guys liked the video, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow me on all the social media like Twitter, Mastodon, PixelFed, and I will see you guys next time.